Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Pollock, and I am the Customer Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, PO Collaboration for Direct Material Purchases, presented by our experts at SourceDay, Andrea and Darren. Before we get started, let's go over some housekeeping items. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise to a minimum. However, throughout the webinar, you can submit any questions you have. If you'd like to submit a question, look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar, and we will answer all your questions at the end of the presentation. We're also recording this presentation, and it will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees, as well as those who've registered but were unable to attend. And finally, we'd appreciate your participation in our polls and closing survey. With that said, we're thrilled to have you take some time out of your busy day to be with us on this webinar. We're here to help you fulfill your vision of a smarter and easier way to run your business by providing you with tools, support, software, and industry knowledge whenever you need it. So whether you're here exploring new solutions or you're just here to learn, don't hesitate to ask any questions you have. And as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels. Check us out and give us a follow on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube so you don't miss out. Okay, that's enough from me. Let's hand it over to Darren and Andrea for the main event.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, SWK, for hosting us. We're thrilled to be here today. Darren and I are going to talk to you about purchase order collaboration for direct material purchases. And we're excited to, if you haven't learned about SourceDay before, to learn about it today and to start the journey with us to have a unified supplier collaboration as a distribution and manufacturing company using Acumatica and working with SWK.
Perfect, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to do a quick intro of myself. My name is Darren Zackelheide. I'm part of the solution consulting team at SourceDay. I actually came out of the manufacturing industry, and then from manufacturing, I got into technology where I've helped companies digitally transform their supply chain over the past 15 years. So I'm happy to be able to present the demonstration of SourceDay today to everyone.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for being here. My name's Andrea Williamson, and I'm a channel partner manager. I work with SWK. I have a pretty good track record with technology companies, and I'm excited to share with you the SourceDay story. I'm going to talk about who we are, why we exist, and why we matter. And then, like Darren said, he's going to show you a demo of our product and go over a special offer that we have today for SWK customers. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So to hear about the SourceDay story, we might want to start with the beginning of the industrial age. Imagine, if you will, go back in time to that bustling factory floor and imagine the clatter and the clamor of machines, the relentless pace of production, the crisscrossing paths of materials, products, and people. Amidst this organized chaos, the link between suppliers and manufacturers was crucial, very critical, often making the difference between success and failure. Fast forward to today, and while the clattering machines have given way to the hum of servers, the vital connection between businesses and their suppliers remains as crucial as ever. It's here that SourceDay was born. Seeing the evolving needs of businesses in the interconnected world, we set out on a mission to revolutionize the way companies manage their supply chains. We envisioned a platform that acts as a lifeline between suppliers and manufacturers, a bridge that not only connects, but also facilitates efficient real-time communication and collaboration. And we did it. We developed a powerful integration that extends your Acumatica ERP to your suppliers, enabling real-time purchase order change management. But SourceDay is not just a software solution. We're a key strategic supply chain partner that we streamline your ability to make those purchase orders in a collaborative way, communicating with your partners. We help to optimize your inventory turns, and we're doing all this in the background so you can focus on driving growth and profitability for your company. SourceDay meets suppliers where they're at by providing a unified supplier collaboration platform, and we ensure 100% purchase order delivery. So let's get into some stats, because these are very important. 52, 33, 40. What does that mean? These are the reasons why SourceDay exists and why supply chains are so difficult and why supply chain disruptions are par for the course. They're not going away. First and foremost, 52% of purchase orders are changing. This is based on over 11 million purchase orders that have come through the SourceDay system in the past 8 years. The data shows that over half of them are going to be adjusted. That means that if Darren's my supplier, I send him a PO. He needs to adjust the date, the quantity, or the price before he sends it back to me, or I adjust it and send it back to him. Typically, when a purchase order changes, it doesn't just change once, it changes 2.5 times on average. So sometimes people go, wait, are you kidding? 50% of the time the purchase order changes? Other times people go, no, that's not even accurate. Like every one of my purchase orders change. So we're actually going to ask you after this slide, what's it like for you? How many times do your purchase orders change? The bottom line though, this change has got to be managed because it's a given. Supply chains are disruptive. What you ordered today, chances are it's not what's going to be delivered when you thought it was going to be delivered. So there's going to be some change management required. It's just a matter of how efficiently your company does that. Another stat, 33% of parts are late. This is something that's very difficult for fulfilling customer demand. I mean, obviously, if a third of your parts aren't going to be there on time, there's nothing that any software can do to fix that. But what technology can do is enable you to understand when those parts are going to be late so you can mitigate the risk and, talk to your customers, talk to your manufacturing floor so you can figure out what to do about that. Finally, 40% of invoices are mismatched. What does that mean? Well, when you try to match the PO, the receipt, and the invoice to pay your suppliers, they're not working. They're not fitting together. Why is that? Well, maybe because 50% of the purchase orders aren't accurate. So when things change and the information's not getting back into the system, into the Acumatica ERP, then when you're going to invoice your suppliers, you might be invoicing based on old orders. That could cause confusions. Delayed payments to suppliers can actually decrease the relationship with your vendors. You may have buyers working with accounts payable, having to reconcile mismatches, and production folks trying to communicate with buyers. So there's a large amount of ripple effects that happen when this process and efficiency isn't built into the Acumatica ERP, or any ERP for that matter. And that's why a company and a solution that SourceDay offers is imperative to a supply chain dependent company. So we're going to ask a question really quick to find out what this is like for you.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. So we are going to do our first poll right now. So we'd love to know what everyone's experiencing when it regards to PO changes this year. So roughly what range of PO changes are you experiencing? Less than 25%, somewhere between 25 to 50, 51 to 75, or even greater than 75%. And we appreciate everyone who's answered so far, and we'll just leave this poll up for a little bit longer, and then we'll get to see what these results look like. Okay, awesome. So we're going to close down the poll now. And Andrea and Darren, it looks like we're kind of a 50-50 split right in the middle there. So, 50% are in that 20 to 50% range, and the other half of the audience is in that 51 to 75% range.
Yeah, that kind of goes right along with our numbers because, like I said, if half the purchase orders change, and then once they change once, they're changing at least an average of 2.5 times. So 50 to 75% is right along the number that we're seeing with our customers. Thank you. So let's look at what this actually means. We looked at the numbers, the internal friction that, obviously that's going to be an issue. Without the accurate supplier data in the ERP, You have different groups within your company asking the status on the orders, the status on when is the parts going to be here, when can we expect these items in. You've got sales account managers trying to get with buyers. You've got people asking, hey, what's the latest and greatest on that order? I need to communicate to my customer. So this causes some internal friction. We're also seeing that the supply chain disruption impacts how you evaluate vendors. It's very difficult to have a supplier scorecard in Acumatica. Most folks that we've seen, they're trying to do this not using SourceDay. They're trying to export it into a CSV and then manipulate all that information and try to come up with it themselves. Not the best solution. So if you don't have a supplier metric, it's very difficult to know which suppliers are helping and which suppliers are hurting your business. And it's also very hard to have productive conversations with them about how to get better now in the current environment. So it's really important to have a good, solid relationship with your suppliers, and evaluations and scorecards actually help with that. Because when you have a conversation, you've got data at your fingertips to show why you're talking to them about it. It's a lot better than trying to remember the conversation you had last week or the last time you placed an order with them a month ago. Also, when we're thinking about visibility issues, it's imperative across the whole organization that you can see that data. That's why you invested in Acumatica, so you can see what's going on. You know, you think about CFOs trying to forecast inventory and account managers trying to communicate with customers. If you don't have the visibility on the supplier side, then if your customer is asking you about what's happening on your open purchase orders, you know, it's almost like trying to fly a plane blind without any access to the instrument panel. And, you know, pilots would have a huge disadvantage trying to do that. And eventually, you know, they probably might crash the plane. So we don't want to do that. We want to have all the visibility that Acumatica offers, extend that to your supply chain and to your suppliers. The big why here of why SourceDay exists is data quality. This is really the number one reason. And with 52% of parts change of orders changing, what does that mean? Well, what we've heard from customers and even from prospects is when they're doing everything in emails and spreadsheets, so they're making changes to those orders, not in the ERP, not in an MRP, and only about half of those changes are actually getting into the system. So what that means is half of your orders change, half of those get updated into the system. That means 25% of your open orders have the wrong dates, wrong quantities, and wrong price. So you ask yourself, how do you run a business if 25% of the data is wrong? And it's not anybody's fault. It's just emails and spreadsheets in the digital transformation age is not the way to go. So let's look at some of this in a little bit more, you know, look at it in terms of the ERP versus suppliers. There's no way to see your supplier's information because it's outside of the ERP. It's outside of Acumatica. Everything outside your company means it's outside the ERP. Inside your Acumatica ERP, you can have access to everything. You can see what's going on. But suppliers, one of your most important stakeholders for your company's success, they're not in it. They're down the street. They don't even have a window. They don't have a door. They don't have access. And because of this gap, people are using spreadsheets, emails. I think Darren had a customer, a prospect last week where they're actually using fax machines. They're still faxing orders. I mean, I shouldn't laugh because, you know, it is what it is. We'll meet the suppliers anywhere they want to go. We'll just make sure that they're getting that data. We're getting the data, we're integrating it into Acumatica. That's the most important thing. When you're trying to grow your organization, it's very hard to do that when you're relying on emails, spreadsheets, Post-it notes, fax machines to update those change orders and then trying to fudge, you know, put those numbers into Acumatica. It's very difficult. So you need the supplier information. And then you need that to have access and visibility to the rest of the organization in Acumatica.
Andrea, the one thing I like to use here as an example as well, if you think about Acumatica as being your cell phone, it is a very powerful piece of equipment. It can do a lot of things. The issue though is if you turn it off of cellular service or put it in the airplane mode, a lot of the extensibility of that cell phone becomes worthless. It doesn't exist. So that's essentially when you're thinking about this right now, you've invested in a powerful cloud-based ERP system. But as Andrea mentioned, your key stakeholder doesn't have that live connection into that ERP. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we solve that, but I want to use that analogy to paint the picture of what's happening in current state with most of our prospects and customers before they implement SourceDay.
Great, thank you. So again, when you're thinking about this, using spreadsheets and emails to make change orders, this leads to a really inefficient communication. We're in 2023, and emails and spreadsheets as the primary way to manage changes and manage your inbound inventory to fulfill demand. There's got to be a better way, right? So again, SourceDay. When you're thinking about the challenges, again, it's a lack of centralized collaboration. Many of you have many different buyers. They might go on vacation. They might get sick. And if those emails are the only way that they're keeping track of the changes in those purchase orders or those spreadsheets that are attached to their emails, how do you get that information if they're sick or if they're on vacation? What happens then? They don't speak to one another. It's not collaborative. It's disparate communication tools that don't talk. So that's kind of an issue. It causes problems in Acumatica. And then we talked about inaccurate data. There's really no way to forecast, especially if you're running an MRP. You have to have accurate data to run your business. And thinking about the bottlenecks to growth. I mean, all these things, how can you grow fast and efficiently and pivot when you need to and have that flexibility with your suppliers if you're stuck in these old ways of communicating? If you're trying to grow your organization, you're trying to make the right bets, put the right resources in the right places to scale your business. And these old ways of collaborating and communicating with suppliers with purchase order changes is not going to be the way to go.
In this, Andrea, is again, if we use the phone example, you have a phone, but if anybody remembers, and I know I do, before Waze and Google Maps and Apple Maps existed, you would go on MapQuest and print out their directions. Now, it was good at that moment in time. That was what was going to happen. Those were the directions, but there was no real-time visibility into construction accidents, where police were, things like that. Again, think about that without supplier collaboration. You basically have a printed out map that you don't have the chance to pivot, to change. It really limits all of the things that Andrea just mentioned here.
Yeah, so we'd like to hear from our audience and see, what are some of your biggest pain points with direct materials this year?
Yes, and we'd appreciate your participation in the second poll that's now up on your screen. So you can, select all your challenges if you're dealing with multiples of these, and then we'll, see where everyone's at.
And as this poll sits here, I will say that we have noticed that a lot of these have changed over the past 2 to 3 years. So during COVID, things were different than they are now. So again, what you did last year is your biggest pain with managing your supply chain and direct materials might be different and changing throughout the course of this year.
And thank you to everyone who's participated. We're going to close this poll out now. So I think based on what Darren said, we're not surprised that we're, all the way across the board, about 25% is dealing with every category, and 100% of you out there in the audience are dealing with late part and material deliveries. So.
Yeah, that's, it's a concern. And again, nobody can make the late parts problem go away, but using technology, you can at least mitigate the risk, understand when it's going to come so you can forecast and plan accordingly. And that's the best that we can do. The supply chain is going to be a disruptor. It's going to continue that way. So let's talk about some solutions, okay? Here you see SourceDay. We're the bridge, like we said in the beginning, the bridge between Acumatica and the whole supplier network. So we have a bilateral integration built for Acumatica. We're a certified ISV, so we're one of those top tier solution providers that work with Acumatica. And this is really the why of SourceDay exists. We exist to extend Acumatica to the supplier network. We don't change the way you use Acumatica at all. Acumatica is your crystal ball. We're invested in Acumatica too. We exist to extend your purchasing capabilities and bring vendors into the fold. And again, that's our big why, is to give suppliers visibility and information they need in Acumatica and make sure you and your suppliers are all on the same page. So thinking about that, looking at the benefits again, what you're gonna see by using SourceDay is first and foremost that 25% of the data that's wrong, we're gonna get that as close to zero as possible to make sure that you're running your MRP, running your forecasting, running your inventory projections with the most accurate real-time data possible and granular data at the line level. Big, bold type here. You need to make sure that the quantities, dates, and prices are always right on the PO line level. So make it or break it in a tight supply chain market with growing manufacturers and distribution companies. We're going to streamline communications. SourceDay is going to automate a lot of the administrator back and forth between buyers and suppliers that's happening today, and a lot of that data entry. So your team, your purchasing and buying team, you guys can focus on things that are more strategic activities, negotiate better pricing, source out new vendors, analyze lead times. We're going to give time back to your team with that more efficient communication that we're doing automatically with our software. Let's think about inventory. Inventory is very difficult right now. Forecasting inventory, making sure you're buying at the right time, at the right levels. This is a very complex process. And unless you have the accurate times of when you're going to receive those parts, you're kind of flying blind. So you need that access. So analyzing the lead times, the correct open order and purchase orders of dates and quantities. You're not going to be doing the buying intelligently. You're going to be holding too much inventory or maybe not enough inventory. So again, you need to have visibility so you can keep it as lean as possible. Okay, nice, lean, clean machine.
And Andrea, this is what we saw like during COVID, especially the data that we had through SourceDay and with our customers. It was get everything you could as fast as you could get it. Inventory started to get bloated. Everybody had a lot of extra inventory on hand. Now everything is shifted, as Andrea mentioned, to get a little bit more lean, sell off inventory, get better predictability of when things are coming inbound. So you can, obviously increase your inventory turns and not hold on to as much inventory as people were trying to do in the dire straits during COVID.
Yeah, exactly. And all this leads to, how scalable is your company? You need to have scalability for growth, and having all this information at your fingertips is really what's so helpful about that. So I'm going to let Darren take over these next couple slides. We're going to talk about our expertise in understanding suppliers and how we work with suppliers, and then he's going to mention the special offer we have for SWK customers.
Perfect. So I think you understand the why SourceDay exists, the challenges that we're solving, the benefits of that. The one thing a lot of people always question is, well, we've heard of these things before. Supplier portals have existed. There's been ways to try to get suppliers to leverage portals and use this connectivity. We're different. I'm going to show you how we're different from a functionality standpoint, but the other side of this is we need to make sure that all of your suppliers can leverage SourceDay. So we understand not every supplier is created equal. So when we look at supplier makeup, we know that based on the data that we have through SourceDay, there's going to be a segmentation of your suppliers. The higher volume suppliers, they have different needs than some of your lower volume suppliers. So on average though, this is the typical makeup of what our customers have in terms of the 4 different segmentations of suppliers. Now, when you think of those different segmentations of suppliers, as I mentioned, the whole goal of SourceDay is to have one single process of accountability and data accuracy for your buyers. So we don't want your buyers to work and manage POs in multiple spots. So what that means is we have to have supplier optionality to meet the suppliers where they are in terms of, you know, their volumes, their segmentation, in terms of their technology sophistication of wanting more or less. So we offer different means how suppliers can communicate with SourceDay, whether it's that smaller change adverse supplier that just wants to use email-based workflows. We might have those larger, more technology, you know, sophisticated suppliers that want some type of digital communication with their ERP like EDI, or some of those other suppliers that want a variety of choices to use the actual SourceDay platform. At the end of the day, no matter what option the supplier chooses, we have the capability to have 100% of those POs to be managed and collaborated on with SourceDay for your buyers. So again, the key message here is we're automating all of those POs. We're giving delivery to your supplier in the choice they want, but we also give alerts throughout the life cycle, no matter what type of workflow or collaboration they're using. Now, one thing, as Andrea mentioned, that we can do for SWK customers, we can do what we call a supply network assessment. So there's a couple things we can do, but we can benchmark your supplier network distribution, some volumes, those suppliers against our network, and also do some analysis to understand how your segmentation looks and how using something like SourceDay can help optimize those workflows, the collaboration with your suppliers. So Andrea, I don't know if there's anything else you want to state here, but I think we're gonna have a little poll just to see if anybody's interested in this. And it's a very lightweight type of process, but it can get some conversation going using your data, your information against our benchmarks.
Yeah, and it's just a no cost, no commit. If you want to do a deeper dive, we could actually go in and do anonymized data of your entire supply chain and put it in the buckets and figure out which ones you're working with ineffectively, which ones, you know, moving them over to different methods and figure that out. We can analyze it against industry data for you and your particular industry and your state. I mean, we're supply chain experts, and we've got hundreds and tens of thousands of suppliers in our network. So we can really look at all this data and just give you some feedback. Doesn't mean you have to work with us, but it's just something we're offering SWK customers because we love SWK.
Thank you both. We love SourceDay too. So if you are interested in getting that free supplier assessment, go ahead and respond in the poll. And we're just going to leave this open for a few seconds. So thanks to you that have already got your answer in. If you haven't, it's a great opportunity to, you know, get really good data and expert advice. Okay, thanks everyone. A couple more seconds and we're going to close this down if you haven't had an opportunity to respond. Okay.
Great. So a lot of information about buyers, problems, challenges, PO management, how SourceDay helps to solve that. I always say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I want to go through a couple ways of how SourceDay will impact Acumatica and your supply chain, and we'll show that with some visuals inside of our demo. So 4 things that I always like to talk about of how can we extend Acumatica to impact your overall supply chain. A lot of these are things that Andrea just talked about, but the first one, and I'll make note that all of these build upon each other. Without number 1, you can't achieve number 4. But number 1 is we want to make sure you have alignment and accountability between you and your suppliers. And what that means is, as Andrea mentioned, we want to make sure we meet your suppliers where they are. We can have supplier optionality so they can communicate with you on those POs at the line level, but we really need a digital thread of information so we can get handshakes between you and your suppliers on those dates, quantities, prices. That also leads to number 2, which means if you can have more accurate information aligned on and agreed upon that's fed inside of Acumatica, that means there's better planning and production. That also means if you're leveraging something like MRP, the accuracy and the output of MRP is more trusted and accurate. So managing those exceptions and actions and getting alignment on MRP is improved. So first of all, I want to take number 1 and number 2 and show you a little bit of what that looks like inside of SourceDay. So when we think about alignment and accountability, what this means, and I'm going to show a couple things. This is the demo side of SourceDay right now, and this is the buyer side. We have a buyer side of SourceDay and a supplier side of SourceDay. And when we think about getting that alignment and accountability, the first thing I want to make note of is your source of truth is Acumatica. So Acumatica is feeding us information at the PO line level, the release level. So what that means is as information of the POs comes out of Acumatica, it comes into what I call the live open order report in SourceDay. So you'll notice a couple things here. We have different buckets that are basically putting those POs in the life cycle where they exist. So if it comes out of Acumatica and the supplier hasn't done any acknowledgement yet, it falls in this bucket. As a supplier is maybe making a change and they're requesting a date shift where they're saying, we need to move this date out, we can't achieve this, we have a raw material problem. You need to know about that. So we give the supplier a way to alert a buyer of that change to the price, the date, or the quantity. So in these examples that you see here, we have some date changes. So what we asked for, the supplier is pushing it out. We have quantity changes, price changes. So this is where we're talking about alignment and accountability. Think about this in terms of a digital handshake. When we look at these changes in terms of dates, price, quantity, if we would accept this date and source date from the supplier, and we click confirm, in real time, this new date, and the new quantity, or the new price at the PO line level will be updated in Acumatica. So all of the things we talked about of maintaining, inventory levels, understanding customer commits, production and planning, running MRP, without this updated information in Acumatica, it's like running in airplane mode. A few other things I'd like to call out here is we are talking about risk mitigation as well. So during the life cycle of the PO, especially if your parts and materials that you're ordering have a longer lead time, the longer the lead time, the more risk there is to change and volatility and actually, things showing up on time. So SourceDay has built-in automation. Some of that automation is very simple in concept, but very powerful in practice. So Radar is a way that we could look at that due date or that ship date on a PO, and we can do a proactive automated outreach to the supplier to say, please do a reconfirmation. We want to know about something that's going to be late before it's late and never shows up at the dock. So if you have a chance in a 2-week period to start to adjust and strategize and work with your suppliers or other suppliers, you want to have that. You don't want things not to just show up and then all of a sudden they fall in the late bucket. So again, when we're talking about alignment and accountability, we achieve that through the digital thread of communication that we can get between you and your suppliers. The other thing, as I mentioned, as we have that, what happens is you get better output for production and planning and MRP purposes. So again, without that, a lot of that is not trustworthy. Now, if we take one step further here, I wanted to show something as well. The way that we look at that from a business process standpoint at a higher level, right? One thing I wanted to call out is from Acumatica, we are a certified ISV, so we have certified integration between Acumatica. So as POs are created and changed and updated between Acumatica and SourceDay, we have this integration that is working real time. And also when I talked about change in accountability and alignment to those prices, dates, and those quantities, we look at things in 2 ways. One, there's a lot of times that your suppliers are making a change. They are pushing out a date. They're giving a partial shipment. They are telling you that the price is increased and you missed the price increase letter. This is what we call a supplier initiated change. Now, obviously you want to get that digital handshake between you and your supplier on that. The minute that you accept it, as I showed in the demo, we will automatically update Acumatica. The flip side, there's a lot of times that your customers are changing dates, quantities on what you need to produce or manufacture. So that's what we call a buyer-initiated change in SourceDay. Now, the buyer-initiated change, again, you don't want to make that change in Acumatica until you know your supplier can commit. So when you make that proposed change in SourceDay and the supplier accepts your change, we will update Acumatica. So again, what we're doing is we're making sure that you have alignment and accountability between you and your suppliers. This has a huge ripple effect upstream and downstream that we'll talk about in a second. Again, there's that reconfirmation I talked about. Andrea mentioned about risk mitigation. Throughout the PO lifecycle, we want to make sure we can automate alerts to your suppliers. There's automated alerts, the ask for reconfirmation. At the end of the day, we want to make sure what is coming inbound is coming inbound in full on time. And we want to also enable you to plan and produce accordingly so you have that visibility of what is coming inbound. Again, the trustworthiness in Acumatica. Now, the other side of this that I wanted to highlight, if I back up 1 second, is because of all this information, we have some enhanced analytics and insights that we could provide. So not just, there's a lot of good data in Acumatica, but there's a lot of things that we can glean based on number 1 and 2 happening inside of SourceDay. So if I take this and we go 1 step further here, I like to use the example of, right, my daughter, she's 11. At any point, I can log on to her school's website. I can see assignments, grades, where she is in terms of performance within that quarter. When I went to school, it was, you didn't know until you brought a report card home at the end of the quarter. So by having real-time collaboration with your suppliers, we can also provide real-time analytics and scorecards with your suppliers. This provides a whole nother level of data analysis that you could do to understand the supplier performance. A couple things I'll just highlight here. We are tracking things like OTIF, on time in full. We pass the goods receipt data up from Acumatica. That helps us to calculate on-time delivery, on-time in full metrics. We can track things like how often our price is changing on the POs as you cut those POs, or how long or how much has it changed over the past year. So price point variance. But what I want to drill into here is understanding the impact of change. Now, a lot of times when you look at analytics, it's just a bunch of data. We want to understand what is the exception and how do we manage that exception and what is causing that exception. In this example here, we know that this supplier, we have so much spend, so many PO lines with them, and we're constantly getting moved out from our request date by 3 months. This is a problem. This is impacting your customers, your revenue, your planning, production. Now, the question is, who is actually making that change? A lot of times it might be your supplier. They're having raw material production problems on their side. Sometimes it's actually your company that's making that change. So we can look at the detailed level of who is making that change. We can see that exception and then start understanding that if it's a buyer initiated change, that means that your buyer is triggering that change and that request the price, that quantity, or that date from your supplier. So the reasoning behind this could be a couple things. Maybe master data is not set up correctly inside of Acumatica for some of these suppliers or parts or materials. So maybe you have to make some adjustment to lead time. Maybe it's the fact that maybe there's a buyer performance problem and you have to have, a conversation with that buyer of managing their business a little bit differently. So the key is we're looking at those exceptions and we're helping you see that by providing you real-time analytics between you and your suppliers with detailed line level of the purchase order management side of the world. Now, the last thing that I had highlighted on our list is the fact that as you clean up your PO process so you can get better alignment on the quantities and the prices on those POs, that also has an impact downstream to your AP team. That means that the invoice accuracy of what your supplier is sending you should be cleaned up. So I would say a clean purchase order should result in a clean invoice and help with more touchless or more exception-free invoice processing. So again, those were the four main benefits that I wanted to, or the four main areas that SourceDay impacts. The benefits though, when you think about this, one, we can pull the buyers out of that tactical role. You might have an expediter today that is just really just doing, expediting, following up on dates. We can shift some of those activities and focus more on supplier relationships and, supplier performance. We also want to make sure, we kept harping on this, we want to make sure the data inside of Acumatica is trustworthy. We want to eliminate the manual work, automate that through the digital thread that I talked about. But again, make sure that what you're looking at in Acumatica, the organization can trust. We want real-time PO status and shared visibility with you and your suppliers. It's not just what you have on your side of the world, but you want to give your suppliers something where they can come and see all of their open orders and what they have to manage with you as well. Very hard to achieve when the ERP is in airplane mode, as I mentioned. And then the last one, at the end of the day, it's about our customers' customers, so your customers. It's about you growing as an organization, increasing margin, having good revenue. So how do you do that? You need to make sure that you can stabilize your inventory. You can produce, manufacture, deliver on time. And obviously, if you can't, your customers need to know about that. Again, just like everything else that we talked about, it's all about visibility, collaboration, and transparency. So hopefully you understand a little bit about how we achieve that through the integration and the certified integration that we have between Acumatica and SourceDay. So I think we're going to have a poll right here as well, Courtney, just about some of the biggest challenges that some of our customers are seeing.
Yes, so that poll should be up on your screen now. So our final poll of the webinar. So we know supplier scorecards are important, but what metric is most important to your organization right now? Thank you for everyone who's answered so far. We'll leave this open for just a few more seconds. Okay, and we're going to close this one out. And, once again, we're almost across the board. So right now, across the board, it's on-time delivery, price change variance, and quality.
And one thing about that result, so when the responsiveness, people weren't tagging that as something that's important. And a lot of times that's not important because it's very hard to measure in a manual process. So when you have something like SourceDay, we can measure down to the hour, the minute of how responsive your suppliers are with changes and updates and things like that. Great. Now, one thing here, this is just going to wrap up my part of the presentation, but really what I wanted to highlight here is the fact that, right, at the end of the day, this is a current customer of ours, that it is about your customer success and delivering products and projects on time. And this is something that Mod achieved. You can see, obviously, there is the manual element, the buyer efficiency. We want to make sure your buyer is not, inundated in manual processes and tactical work. So that is a benefit. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that your revenues are protected and you can satisfy, the demands and the needs of your customers.
Yeah, and the increase in on-time delivery is amazing. I mean, that's just all about customer service. So yeah, we've got a lot of good stats, a lot of good info on our website as well, sourceday.com. So we hope you enjoyed the webinar and found it informative. If you have any questions, we're the experts. Darren's actually a supply chain wizard. He understands things from a technical perspective, how things work. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask away right now. We've got a couple more minutes before the end of the webinar.
Yeah, so to echo Andrea, we're on our Q&A portion. So thank you for the few questions you've submitted already. So we're going to get started with those in just a second. And then if you have any other questions, you can put them in the questions section of your GoToWebinar or in the chat box, and I'll get those asked to Andrea and Darren so we can get you an answer. So while we're waiting on those additional questions to come in, I'm going to go ahead and ask you some questions we had throughout the webinar. So the first question, I think this one is very common for, add-on solutions is, are you certified with Acumatica?
Yeah, we mentioned that. Actually, yeah, out of like maybe over 300 ISVs, like less than 150 actually get certified by Acumatica. And part of that is to stay current. And so the team at SourceDay, we're always focused on making sure that every time there's a new revision of Acumatica, which is twice a year, we're on top of it and we're always current.
That's awesome. And I think we might have touched somewhere on this one, but do suppliers have any fees to use SourceDay?
Great question. There are 0 fees for suppliers. We actually have kind of a white glove onboarding where we train them, we work with them. That's why we have so much supplier data in our system as well. So there's no fee for suppliers. We take care of it for our customers and manage it pretty well. When I joined the team, I was very impressed with how nicely we train and support and onboard suppliers. Anything you'd add to that, Darren?
I think the other thing is supplier optionality. We don't force your suppliers into one way of doing, PO collaboration. So as we mentioned, we always say we like to lean into where your suppliers are today. Sometimes they don't want to be where they are today. They don't want to be in email. So we provide obviously other capabilities for suppliers that want to also have some value and some business efficiencies on their side.
Yeah, good point.
And I think, Darren, that leads into another question that came through during the presentation, which, what if a supplier doesn't want to use a portal? So, these smaller suppliers, mom and pop shops, if you want to just recap kind of how you handle that.
Absolutely. And that always exists, right? There's always that. We showed the supplier makeup. You're always going to have a variety of different suppliers from large to small mom, pop, brother, sister shops. So what we can do for that, we have email-based workflows. So if they receive an email today with a PO PDF, we have ways that we can support those suppliers in what we call a email-based workflow. Couple simple buttons. If they want to collaborate and communicate with a click of a button through that email, they can do that. Or they might just use the PO PDF as they would today.
That's awesome. And so I think what will be our last question, I'll ask what everyone wants to know. How long does it take to implement SourceDay?
Yeah, perfect. I can take a cut at that. So because of the certified integration, that takes a lot of the work from the technical side done, but typically it would be about 5 to 6 weeks. And that doesn't include, and that's basically saying it's not all technical work. There's business process, there's workflows that we review, retest. Because again, every customer has different ways they manage POs and dates and things like that differently. So from a technical standpoint, it's pretty lightweight. The business processes where we'll do some mapping, workflows, discussions, testing and that. But typically it's about 6 weeks.
Yeah, what I've heard actually is if you sign up for SourceDay like in the middle of the month, by the beginning of the month after that, so about 45 days, you're like up and running live, typically. Is that right, Darren?
Yep. It's
that's pretty fast.
It is.
Yeah, that's a great turnaround, guys.
It is. Yeah, thank you.
So I think, unless we get a last minute submission here, I'm going to say that is all the questions we have for today. So I'd like to thank you both for really informative, great presentation, and everyone in the audience for taking time out of their day. I know everyone's busier than ever, so we appreciate you taking some time with us today. So thank you, Darren, thank you, Andrea, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, SWK. Thanks, everybody, for being on the call. And yeah, if you want to talk to your account manager at SWK and get in touch with us, we're here for you.
Yep, and let us know in that post-webinar survey if you guys, if you didn't have an opportunity to say you're interested in that assessment or you'd like to see a demo or anything else, we'll put you in contact with Andrea and Darren, or you can just reach out to your account manager. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.